Okay. So thank you guys for starting early with me. It ended up not being that early, but so be it. We are doing the grapes of Burgundy and Alsace. So there's two white wines, Riesling, and Riesling is from Alsace, and Chardonnay is from Burgundy. So right now we're going to put the Riesling in the freezer and the Chardonnay in the fridge. And so the Chardonnay is going to be this guy in a gold bottle, and then the Riesling is in a skinnier bottle and see-through. Okay. So we're going to have a little agenda today. We are going to talk about New York finally, or this is the week that we actually can talk about some local things, which is nice. It's a nice little change. So we're going to start talking local. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the old world. And then we're going to get our tasting on the way. So today, as I said, the grapes are Riesling. It's the grape of Germany. It's also the grape of the Finger Lake region in New York. And then we have Chardonnay, which is the white grape of Burgundy in Northeast France, where we were last week. It's also the grape of Champagne, but we did a little Champagne last week, so we might gloss over. So honorable mentions for today, we have Gewürztraminer, which is also a neighboring grape in Alsace. And then we have Pinot Gris, or Pinot Grigio in Italy, which is also a cool climate grape varietal. We are not drinking either of those, but we are drinking Riesling. And so here's a little sketch.
Riesling around the globe. Well, Germany still remains the world's biggest producer of Riesling in areas like the Mosel, the Rhine-Goat, Pfalz. It's incredibly popular in France in Alsace, although critically, this is actually the only part of the country where this particular vine is allowed. Once Riesling started to spread out of Germany and into places like France, as well as countries like Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Austria, it actually found a really great home in the Wachau in Austria, where they are known for producing the country's best examples of Riesling. Further afield, Australia has become a real hotspot for fantastic Rieslings around the Clare Valley and the Eden Valley areas. And within the United States, probably most notably in Washington State, although also popularly found in New York State and California as well, you'll find some fantastic expressions of Riesling. So when we're talking about Riesling as a grape variety, how does it perform in the vineyard? Well, Riesling is suitable for growing in cooler wine regions. And I think when we talk about areas like the Mosel and the Rheingau in Germany, they are particularly cool. So one of the beneficial elements of Riesling is that the vines show resistance to frosts. It does have that propensity to ripen early in warmer regions, although of course it is suitable for late harvesting in the right conditions. And we'll come on to some of those other harvesting methods a little bit later on. Finally, and again, we will cover this later on, it is susceptible to noble rot, which means you're able to produce some particularly different styles of Riesling in the winery. And it's in the winery where we start to express all of the different.
So now just a reminder, noble rot is what we saw in Bordeaux with Sauvignon Blanc. It makes a wine called Sauterne. It is a fantastic dessert wine, and Riesling, likewise, in Alsace and Germany, make fantastic dessert wines.
The acidic grape varieties are very high in natural acids, producing these very, very fresh wines. So you'll see in this picture, you have things like lemon, lime, so things like peach, nectarine, and that movement from a fresher citric or green fruit to a stone fruit, or even tropical sometimes, is really going from a cold location like Germany and Alsace to a warm location somewhere like Australia. And that's your kind of fruit backbone of Riesling. In the background, you may see the floral notes of Riesling, things like jasmine, blossom, or chamomile, is quite common on the younger style Rieslings. And Riesling, as it ages, can be a little bit more honeyed, naturally. And that's quite a classic note. Some people are obsessed with Riesling when it ages because of this really interesting aroma of petrol oily sort of note to it, beeswaxy character. So Rieslings are fabulous, very regal, often called the most noble of the white grapes. I hope you've enjoyed your introduction to it. If you wish to know a little bit more about it.
So yes, it is definitely one of the more regal grapes. I definitely would say if I could only have one, I might say if I could only have one wine for the rest of my life, it would be Riesling, just because it goes with so many things well. And it really is it's a very Northern European thing. It's usually, most wines can be, 13 to 15% alcohol. Riesling is about 8%. It's 8.5. And so it's almost like a beer percentage in terms of alcohol content. And like, so that means it's low cal for if you're watching your, waistline, but it also means that it just pairs so well with, lunch. It pairs so well with other meals where you want a lighter wine. And because of the low alcohol, it actually pairs really well with spicy foods, which we'll get to. But Chardonnay is also a very well-known grape variety. And so we're going to discuss that after. But for now, we are talking about Riesling. And so the three regions I want to focus on are Alsace in France, the Mosel Valley in Germany, and the Finger Lakes region in New York. And we're going to start in New York to change it up, which is at a similar latitude as these other Old World regions.
Is one word to describe Finger Lakes Riesling. I think I'd use refreshing.
Finger Lakes Riesling in one word is lively, elegance,
Opulence.
Finger Lakes Riesling in one word is quality,
Is satisfying. Is acidity.
boldness.
One word that describes Finger Lakes Riesling is versatility.
Finger Lakes Riesling in one word is delicious.
Diversity.
Finger Lakes Riesling is triumph.
Is slate.
Is electric. It says a lot of things in a lot of different ways about what Riesling is. It's not just a wine for summer, but it's cool, it's crisp, it's refreshing. It lingers on the palate.
Yes. So
Many wine experts across the United States believe that the Finger Lakes is the best region in America for growing quality Riesling. Allowing north to south Finger Lakes favor all these special mesoclimate is cool enough to.
yeah, I'm not sure what's happening, but basically, yes, New York is a great place to grow Riesling. Oregon grows a good amount, but I think they grow more actually than New York State does. But New York State, we produce the fourth most wine out of any state. So, out of 50 states, we're at 4, behind California, Washington, and Oregon. Texas is a close 5th, but New York is a little better than Texas. But it is, so we're in the top 5 for wine producing states. That said, you do have California making 90% of the US wine economy. So it is, the giant, but we do produce a sizable amount, and it's only a couple hours away. And I think it's worth focusing on today with another little clip.
Riesling likes this area. It just likes to grow here. It does well in relatively warm years. We're afraid it's almost too warm, and in cool years, it still makes really good wine, and the flavors always seem to be well expressed. All around is probably the best variety here.
Somewhere 20-some years ago, we were making wines, and you kept coming back to that Riesling tank and said, dang it, this stuff is world class. And we've done nothing but get better at making Riesling around here.
It's versatile, it's easy, it grows well here, which makes all the difference in the world. But you can do so much with it stylistically that we've really sort of come to the point where Finger Lakes Riesling is becoming its own style, and that's really exciting.
Riesling for us is really our benchmark, and it's becoming that for the region as well. More and more people are discovering Riesling in the Finger Lakes, but there are other cool climate Northern European varietals that also do well. But specifically, Riesling is so consistent. Year after year, we're winning gold medals in the Finger Lakes with Riesling. And also, it's one of the most winter hardy of all the vinifera. So that's another reason it's so well adapted to the Finger Lakes.
It's the one grape that we're absolutely confident we can make in a world-class style. We can make Riesling here, Riesling wines here that are as good as anywhere in the world. That doesn't mean they're the same. They shouldn't be the same as people's from Austria or Germany or anywhere else, but they're great, great wines. We can compete on the world stage.
The real reason why we grow Riesling is because we're the best at it, and we have too much humility to really say that more often than we should. And I think that, being part of harvests around the world, the Finger Lakes Riesling is hands down the top contender of that variety. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we choose to grow it. And I think our convictions to continue growing it show that we have a huge desire to do something with it. And it's just proven itself over the years to never limit itself whatsoever. And that's why we grow it.
So the Riesling in New York State is going to be a little bit higher in alcohol. So instead of, I said 8% for a German or Alsatian Riesling, we're looking more at around 10%, just because it is a teeny bit warmer here. And so you are going to get a little bit more sugar during the summer, and so a little bit more alcohol after fermentation. So now we're going to plot on over to Alsace in France. It is, as you can see on the map, on eastern France, and it's actually on the border between Germany and France. And we're going to hear that again and again because Alsace and Lorraine during the Franco-Prussian War, during World War I, during World War II, it kept changing hands. And so you have this synthesis of German cuisine and culture with French cuisine, which is not seen in many places.
Moving along, I've got 2 more wines on my list. On the far northern eastern side of France, you'll find the region of Alsace. It's actually on the borders with Germany, and that area has maybe changed hands a few times between Germany and France. And the area, because of this lineage, is very unlike the rest of France. And if I were to pick the most French Alsatian wine, because there's a lot of Germanic influence. In fact, most of the wines are labeled by variety. You'll find single varietal Riesling there, Pinot Gris, and that sort of a thing. But the wine that I would pick from Alsace is a blend. And that's because I really think the French influence on Alsace got them to sort of start blending their grapes varieties together. And these tend to be more affordable wines from that region, but I really think they sort of master what Alsace is all about. And there's 2 wines I might look for, and one is Pinot d'Alsace. It's all the Pinot varieties, be it Pinot Noir or Pinot Gris, blended together and made into a sort of white style of wine. So they squeeze them off without the skins. And then the other one I looked for is called a Gentil style of blend, and it's or Edelzweiker, and they'll blend a bunch of different white grape varieties together and make a delicious, aromatic, tasty, minerally white wine. And
so as she said, they don't always make them blended. So France does, but Germany labels their wines by grape varietal, as we do in America, as they do in Australia, and as they do in a lot of countries in the New World, so places outside of Europe. As we said, though, Alsace is along the Vosges Mountains, and they do have warm summers, but they have very cold winters, just like Champagne, France does as well. And so because we're running late, we're probably only going to show a little bit of this clip.
Its unique local cuisine, part German and part French,
place.
Is perfectly complemented by a rich selection of world-class white wines.
Alsace is a very narrow region that it's sitting between, on the left, the Vosges mountain that gives a natural protection from the west weather. And on the right, you have the Rhine River and Germany. And this narrow region is actually the smallest wine region in France.
You have average 650 millimeter rain per year, average. So what it makes Alsace vineyards by the driest from France.
That's the reason we can produce fantastic long ripening grape varieties like Riesling, Gewürztraminer, and Pinot Gris, which demand to ripen slowly.
Alsace has been shaped by centuries of competing empire.
So yes, it is a very renowned grape varietal, and it grows very well in Alsace. There you can see bottles. The first growths, you do see them, go for about $100 or $200 sometimes, and so they do make very nice wines. And then the shape of the bottle is going to be similar to our German Alsace in the freezer. I misspoke. In that it is very skinny. Nothing wrong with being skinny, but that's just the shape. It's called a Flute de Alsace. So going on to Germany, I'm just now reminding myself that we need to set a little timer for the stuff in the fridge and freezer. But we're going to do Germany now. So we're crossing the border into Germany. As you can see, on the southwest of Germany is where we have France. And Germany is a very big country, but you really can't grow much wine in the northern half of it. So it's really the southern half that we're going to be focusing on. And we're going to listen to a little video.
It is fairly far north and relatively cool. In fact, Germany is further north than you can usually ripen grapes. So there needs to be some kind of mechanism to help the grapes ripen. Enter the rivers. The rivers are important because they help moderate the climate. They act as heat sinks. In other words, they take in heat during the day and keep a little bit of warmth in the vineyard overnight.
I wanted to interrupt that. I didn't want to switch sides, but so in the Finger Lake region, the Finger Lakes are big lakes. They do the same thing. They absorb the water. They absorb the heat. They have water, which has a heat capacity to store the heat. And then it re-emits the heat at night, and it re-emits the heat in the fall to enable a lengthening of the growing season, which is why New York can grow wine, Riesling, as well as Germany can. So we hope.
It is fairly far north and wine way that helps them. Okay. In the bends of the rivers, we have steep slopes, and these slopes are important because they present the vines to the sun in a way that helps them ripen too.
Now, isn't German wine sweet? Isn't it all Riesling? Those bloody Germans make anything else?
That's true. It is mostly Riesling. But there are also a number of other grapes that are used in Germany too. Sylvaner, Scheuerrebe, Müller-Thurgau, even some Burgundy varieties like Pinot Blanc, which they call Weißburgunder, or even Pinot Gris, which they call Grauburgunder.
Just a little zooming in here. So if you look at those words that he just said, Burgunder, we know that one of the wines we're studying today is from Burgundy. So even though it's German, even though it's a different language, on a label, if we read that, we can try to parse out the fact that it's a Burgundy style wine. So Grauburgunder, Burgund. So just reading labels a little.
Red grapes, there are a number, but the most important one is Pinot Noir, which they call Spätburgunder. Overwhelmingly, though, the wines are actually not sweet, and Germany is moving more and more toward a drier style, even for the Rieslings. These days, about 90% of the wines made in Germany are actually dry, or as they call them, trocken. At the same time, we should probably get away from the idea that all sweet wines are for amateurs. Some of the most beautiful wines in the world have residual sugar in them, and it shouldn't be a measure of quality whether the wine is dry or sweet. German wine labels can be pretty complex, but the classification system is relatively simple. There are 4 basic levels of wine in Germany.
In the interest of time, we're just going to say there's Cabinet, Auslese, and then some other levels. And they indicate the level of ripeness. And so Donhoff is a great producer of, finer quality stuff. So, as you can see, on the top of the label, we have the name of the brand. Underneath that, we see some German stuff. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but some German stuff we don't understand. Then under that, we see Riesling Spätlese, which is the indication that it's Riesling and of a certain sweetness level. Then we have the vintage, 2007. Then we have on the bottom of the label, Nahi, which is the region in Germany. It's a very poor soil. It's made of slate a lot mainly, and it actually helps with the grabbing of the heat, which is a common theme, and the reflection onto the vines of the sunlight. And as we said, Cabinet is going to be the driest. Then we have Spätlese, which has a little bit more sugar. So it's not a dessert wine, but you can probably have it with, spicy food because it does have a little sugar to soften the spice. Auslese and BA are going to be more towards your dessert wine end. And then likewise, we have, I said there's a Sauterne-like wine. So one affected by Botrytis, Noble Rot. And that's going to be labeled TBA. That's going to be served in probably a half bottle and cost about $100 a bottle. And then we have ice wine, which, though it's not spelled like ice and wine would be in America, it is what we in New York State call ice wine. And so you let the grape freeze, and as it freezes, the water kind of separates itself from the sugar. And so you're able to produce a more concentrated wine. One of the regions is the Rhine, or the Rheingau. And so you have places, there are a lot of words on a German label. So Schloss, Johannesburg, I probably mispronounced that. Schloss, you see it a lot on labels. I mean, castle, just like chateau in French means castle. So similar stuff there. And then the real main region in Germany, which we're actually going to be sampling with our first wine, is the Mosel Valley. So most German wine that, especially at the entry level, is going to be, Mosel, just because that is their most well-known region, especially for Riesling. As I said, German labels can be intimidating. And so it really helps to parse them apart. We're not going to do that fully here because I think in our fridge, we have a great example of an international style label, in that it's easy for an international consumer like us to understand. Traditionally, Germany as a country has a lot of issues with exporting wine because no one understands what the hell's going on their labels, and so people just don't buy them. So they're really making an effort to make them more understandable. So maybe when we're adults, you're not going to need a key to read a German label. That said, let's drink. Freezer. And so you'll notice the German wine as well. It's a screw top. And so what that tells us as a consumer is that it's going to be a style to drink early. So this wine, though it probably could age, a couple of years, a few years, it is a wine to drink now. And you can see on the cute label, which is good for an international market, that there are pictures of slates, which is the soil. So Cameron, we're drinking the Riesling first. Good question. So the one that we put in the freezer is the one we're going to be drinking now. So Riesling now and Chardonnay after. Hope that clarifies. Okay, so let's do it. So I just poured my glass. We're going to now observe it. So color-wise, it's very pale in the glass. It's even paler than Sauvignon Blanc usually, and it does have a green tinge to it, which you should notice. Now on the nose, Riesling is a very aromatic grape variety, and that's one of the things many people love about Riesling is that, we were talking about other German varietals like Gewürztraminer. Gewürztraminer is also very aromatic. It's even more aromatic. So it's like, a slap in the face if you sniff it. It smells like roses, lychee, and spice. But, Riesling is a little more, slightly more mellow, but it's still a very aromatic grape in which you get more fruit notes, and they're very pleasant to sniff. So I on the nose, I'm definitely getting, some citrus fruit. I'm getting, lemon, lime. You could say lime peel, lemon zest. You can use one of those words for it. And then, I'm also getting stone fruit. So, think peaches and apricots. And so especially we're going to see that more in kind of a New York style, which is a little bit warmer, or especially Oregon or Australia, which does make a little Riesling. You're going to have more of those stone fruits, whereas a colder place, you have more, think high acid, think lemon, lime. Now, in terms of other notes, I think this label is trying to steer us towards the fact that we should be getting a flinty or a slaty taste. And so you can only get that on the palate. So I think that gives us an excuse to drink. Okay. So yeah, on the palate, I'm getting a lot more of those stone fruit notes. So as we said, nectarine, peach, apricot. I taste a little bit of residual sugar. So, it's not a totally dry wine, though on the label, it says, no, it doesn't pretend to be, but it's 11%. So it's a little bit on the southern regions of the valley, I'm assuming. So it's not so much north, as north as it could be. But, it is a fantastic wine. It is a wine that would pair lovely, as Riesling ages, and I'm not totally getting it here, but one note is, we call it gasoline or petrol. If you ever filled up a tank before, the smell of it. Some people really love it. I know I do. In a 10-year-old bottle of Riesling, you have these gasoline notes, and it really, it's hard to replicate, and it sounds unappetizing, but it actually is. It's not too, it's subtle, and so it really is. And some people do like that smell. And so it is a wine that is desired for that being a reason. But yeah, I would say, it's definitely off dry. You pinch your nose and taste it. I'm sure you'll still get a little bit. I'm going to do that just to make sure. Yes, I did get a little sugar still, which is not a bad thing, especially when we consider it's so high acid. And so you're using the sugar to balance some of that acidity, because otherwise it would be like drinking, spiked lemon juice, and which is not fun. And so they add a little sugar, which they also do when we get on to our next wine, Chardonnay, if it's a very cold year, they add sugar in both of these places, especially in Europe, to help ripen. But now, I mean, to help add sugar so it becomes a more balanced wine and not too acidic. But with climate change, they're going to do that less and less. So they, in Northern Europe, are benefiting a little bit in terms of wine. Let's see how we did. So on Vivino, as Natalie recommended, we do see, we have, the pear, the peach, so the stone fruit and the tree fruit. So, I didn't explicitly say apple pear, but pear, I definitely can see why people are saying that. I definitely did get that. It was like our Prosecco, I believe, showed the similar notes of, and so we are getting some of that there. But then like the Sauvignon Blanc, which was week 2, not week 1, we're getting that citrus, lime, and lemon notes. And then, people are saying for this wine on Vivino that they are getting minerality, so slate, honey, and I do see the honey. And notice it says the lower Mosel and the middle Mosel. So I definitely think that this wine is more towards the lower and middle, just because it's not as sharp or as angular as one would expect from a northern Mosel. In terms of pairing, we see that each level of sweetness has a different recommended pairing. So a cabinet, which is a little drier, would pair better with a creamy dessert, whereas the ice wine, the sweetest, would pair with a sweet dessert, just because when you have a dessert, you want this wine to be sweeter than the dessert, but that requires that the dessert also be sweet. So one is not too sweet in comparison to the other. And so as one gets sweeter, you need the other thing to get sweeter. And then in terms of pairings, the reason Riesling is kind of, they call it a sommelier's best friend, because it is pairing with everything. If you notice, if you read this diagram, you see for salt, it recommends a sweet wine. And so this has a little sugar, it's a sweet wine. For fat, it recommends an acidic wine. Riesling, very high acid. On the top right, we see sweet, it recommends a sweet wine. It's sweet, it does that. On the bottom left, if you're eating an acidic food, it recommends a Sauvignon Blanc, which is high acid, or a sweet wine. This is both of those things. If you're eating bitter, it literally recommends off dry Riesling. And spicy, it recommends a sweet wine, which Riesling is. So there's a reason why it pairs so well with everything. And it really is a go-to wine, especially if you're at a table that has people getting different orders and you want to please everyone a little. So because of that, we say, when in doubt, break the Riesling out. It is going to be a little more food friendly than a sparkling wine, just because sparkling, like our Prosecco from week 1, is not going to really it wouldn't do well with a sweeter food. It would be too dry in comparison. And so this Riesling would pair better. And if you want the health benefit of red wine, the Beaujolais would be the way to go. But Riesling would probably be a little more versatile, depending your audience. And so we are gonna, this is me rambling. We'll see, basically though Riesling pairs with everything, not every occasion pairs for Riesling. And so just like,
people don't know when to order wine and when not to. People order wine on nights out, in pubs, in places where they want to drink alcohol and other people are drinking alcohol, and that's their drink of choice. And that's totally fine. I just think a skill that's worth developing is knowing when to gauge the situation and think, okay, this is a time that I'm going to get a good wine drinking experience, as opposed to knowing the atmosphere, knowing the venue, knowing that they don't do wine, they do beer, they do whiskey, and just kind of adjusting accordingly, I think, is a skill that needs to be developed. Just because if you're too rigid, you're bound to have a lot of bad experiences because you're not going with what you should do.
So that was a little painful for me to watch, but I hope it showed some guidance. Keep the Chardonnay in the fridge. I was just getting a little head start. And so hopefully it wasn't as painful for you to watch, but We're now going to start part 2, which is the Chardonnay. Keep sipping your Riesling as we get going. So now we're just going to talk about it from a grape perspective. And then instead of listening to me talk about it, we're actually going to, sorry about that. We are actually going to watch a little slideshow, I think it's called. There's music. Okay, so it was going a little fast. I don't know if anyone could read it quickly enough, but we're talking about 3 regions now, just like we did for Riesling. We're talking about Burgundy, where we were last week, Champagne, where we were last week, and Sonoma, which is in California, and that is going to be where our wine is from. And so, as the little description said in the little clip, Chardonnay doesn't. It really adapts to the situation, and so it's a chameleon. It's really a winemaker's grape in that whatever the winemaker wants to show is what's going to show. Whereas for other varietals, there's kind of a personality that if they bring to everything. Chardonnay is a little more malleable. They go with the flow. If you want it to be bold and vanilla-y, you can make a wine called, vanilla ice cream. I mean, that's probably a shitty name, but you can call it, vanilla and sell it under that brand and really sell a wine that tastes like vanilla. You could, on the other hand, sell a wine that tastes like citrus fruit. So it really is based on the winemaker and what they want and the place that they grow the grapes. So one place where they can grow the grapes, Burgundy in France, is where we're going to have 2 regions, Chablis and Mâconnais. So that's going to be Mâconnais is in southern Burgundy, whereas Chablis is the northernmost Burgundy. And then everywhere in between, you do have more Chardonnay being grown, but those are the 2 extremes and 2 of probably the most well-known of the 2. And so, as we said earlier, this thing called chaptalization, not capitalization, but the addition of sugar to grape juice is done because it's unpredictable weather in Burgundy. at least historically, before it's warmed up in recent years, it was a place where there was higher acid, there was variability, and so they weren't able to ripen fully every year. And so especially a place like Chablis, especially where there would be hail and snow in the early part of the growing season, these delicate flowers would fall off the vine because, the hail would be too rough for the very beginning of the life cycle to handle. And so you would have, a 50% reduction in yield. You would have, people in France upset. And so it is a place where they do manipulate a little bit, but they don't manipulate the other way. So in very hot regions, like Australia, they try to add acid to wine to make it more balanced. That is illegal in France because they've never had that issue. So it's funny that the legislation is kind of formed around the needs of the wine growers. So, chaptalization is legal there because they sometimes need to do it. In Australia, adding sugar to wine is illegal. So it's funny how the laws reflect the necessities to some extent. So as we said, Chablis and Mâconnais are going to be the ones we focus on. And so we are going to listen to a little clip.
One of the most famous appellations in the whole of Burgundy is Meursault. At the southern end of the Côte de Beaune, this large village borders both Pouligny and Chassagne-Montrachet, which make the most expensive white wines in the world. Producing almost 100% Chardonnay, Meursault doesn't boast any Grand Cru, but lays claim to a few prestigious Premier Cru. Where this appellation really comes into its own, however, is its village wines, where you can find incredible value for money. Meursault wines show toasty aromas of nectarine, peach, and hazelnut. The palate is rich, nutty, and can have a real intensity to the fruit. The finish is long with a lovely balanced acidity. Heading all the way down to the sub-region of the Mâconnais, we find another well-known appellation, Pouilly-Fouissé. Located in the commune of Fouissé, the wines here are exclusively Chardonnay. Pouilly-Fouissé has captured the hearts of many international consumers due to its reputation for producing richer and softer wines than the northern sub-regions of Burgundy. As with the whole of the Mâconnais sub-region, there are no Premier or Grand Cru vineyards here. However, a recent movement aims to classify around 22% of their vineyards to Premier Cru level. The light golden colour of Pouilly-Fouissé wines reflect the warmer southern climate of Burgundy. The wines show concentrated citrus and honeycomb aromas, and on the palate they have a lovely weighted intensity.
I meant to pause, not do that, but
one of the most famous appellations.
I don't know how to. But basically, what I wanted to emphasize was that tropical fruit is going to be coming from places where it's more tropical. So warmer areas, as a rule of thumb, are going to have more tropical notes. So in a place like California, we may see something like pineapple. In terms of the fruit notes, whereas in France, they're much less likely to see that. So I just want to emphasize tropical plants and tropical fruit. Think warm places. Warm places. Think the Chardonnay is going to show more tropical fruit notes.
One of the most famous.
And just pretend that they don't grow lemons in the tropics, even though they do, because lemon notes and acidic notes are going to be coming from colder areas. So high acid, cold regions, citrus fruit. Okay. So as we said, there's a Côte de Beaune, Côte d'Or, and Mâconnais. So, I think the beautiful hills, the golden hills, and Mâconnais. I'm not sure the direct translation, if there is one. But you have another region, which is the northernmost Burgundy, which, is the most susceptible to having poor yields because of weather. And it's the cold, the whole area is very chilly, but this is the coldest of the cold. And so let's watch a little bit.
Winemaking here is rooted in an ancient church, and this 12th century press still operates as it once did. These monks created a style of Chardonnay that took its name from Burgundy's northern region, Chablis. In the 16th and 17th century, Chablis had a virtual monopoly on the lucrative Parisian market. And around this time, the English started to import substantial quantities. Riverways and canals were used as an effective means of transportation, and this really allowed Chablis to become one of the most extensively planted vineyards in the world. Chablis is the most northerly growing region in Burgundy and grows Chardonnay exclusively, with 7 Grand Cru and 40 Premier Cru vineyards. The secret to this region's style lies in an ancient seabed of fossilized shells called Kimmeridgian soil, which infuses the minerality of the limestone into the wine. For me, the wines of Chablis are the purest expression of the Chardonnay grape. The use of stainless steel tanks and limited oak influences means that the wine retains its acidity, minerality, and green apple notes. When someone tells me they don't like Chardonnay, I tell them I haven't tasted Chablis. So the vineyards of Chablis are pretty steep.
Yeah, very steep.
What kind of angle is this?
45 degrees.
45
Yeah,
degrees.
yeah.
Do you pick these vineyards by hand or by machine?
Only by hand.
I can see why. Gregory Viennois is a man who climbed the ranks in France's wine industry and is technical director at Domaine La Roche.
You can see the limestone. It's a very white limestone here, and it's very important for our wine.
The rugged slopes of Chablis are incredibly difficult to cultivate. but the vines draw out the character of the rocks below. What gives Chablis its unique expression to Chardonnay?
So it's a very white limestone. As you can see, we have a lot of fossilized oyster here.
Okay.
You can smell the minerality of Chablis. If you can taste it.
Really? Yeah. There's almost a salty mineral character.
It's a salinity, it's a minerality. So it's like a transfer between the soil and the wine. Because of the purity of the grapes, of the wine, of the limestone, we don't need to have too much oak. It's why we always use a pot in a stainless steel. But we need to have stainless steel to conserve the purity. It's important.
The minerality you get out of Chablis is so specific, so deep, and so unique that you cannot confuse a Chablis with any other wine in the world.
Very difficult to define what minerality is, but there's something that would kind of keep the wine alive and very lively and very fresh and a very long-lasting taste. And that's very specific to Chablis, even though it's 100%.
So yes, Chablis grows Chardonnay, and it's Chardonnay that is very specific to the soil, the Cameroonian soil. It's a limestone. Limestone is a base because lime is a base. And basic soils produce acidic grapes for a reason I don't fully understand, but it's the rule of thumb that is always the way it is. And so you have very acidic grapes coming out of Chablis, even more acidic than one would expect just from the weather. And that affects the terroir. And what's so interesting is going back to what was said, the soil is literally calcified and fossilized oyster shells and clam shells because it used to be a seabed. And one of the great pairings is Chablis with oysters. So, you take the fossilized oysters, you turn it into soil, and then you grow grapes on it, and then it pairs really well with living oysters. Little fun fact. And so, terroir is, defined by a lot of things, as we said. One of them is nature, but one of them actually is also going to be man. So the, human influence and the interpretation of what nature is rendering. Some other characteristics that influence terroir. And notice that terroir is not going to mean that the wine tastes like dirt, or the guy licked the dirt in the video, the subsoil, and it's not going to taste like that, but it's going to taste in a way that's influenced by it. Now we're going to go on to Champagne, where we were last week, and we're going to maybe go a little more quickly this time, just because I know you had some exposure and you guys are pros in Champagne. Champagne, northern France, makes a lot of sparkling wine. They also add sugar to the wine because it's very cold, and they have to, so they have chaptalization. I got to find the better way to pronounce it because it sounds so similar to capitalization that it keeps bothering me. But it's really called dosage. So in French, it's dosage. And so, as you can see, especially if looking back to week one, when we were talking about Prosecco and Brut and extra Brut, they do have a classification on how much sugar they add based on the sweetness level desired in the product. So, in the numbers are showing the grams of sugar added for a glass, and then underneath that, the grams of sugar for a bottle. And so you can see, one entire bottle of the sweetest one is still less sugar than, one 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola. So it's not that sweet in reality, but you taste it with wine. And so you really notice it, especially because we're so used to dry wines. And a champagne style that it's usually a blend, but if they make it all from Chardonnay grapes, it's called a Blanc de Blanc, Blanc de Blanc, and it's made in the Côte de Blanc, especially the White Hills. And these were the other grapes. Now, as you can see, this is the overall process of making all wine, but especially champagne, which is coming from the 49th line of latitude. And one thing, a little mnemonic to help you remember it, but champagne, CH, is chalk soil. So, earlier in Burgundy, we had limestone. We had Cameroonian limestone for Burgundy, for Chablis, which is limestone. Here, pretend that was not a CH, but here for Champagne, we have chalk or chalk. And it is what Champagne is known for. It's also very cold in Champagne, like it is in Burgundy, but even more so. So if you go there in winter, don't expect to have much fun. It's pretty nippy. I don't know why I just said that, but it's pretty cool. And so, they harvest, and then there's a special thing for Champagne is the malolactic fermentation. So, you have the malic acid, like in the Prosecco, that apple, think apple, turning into lactic acid, which you guys all remember from your various microbiology things is, being produced from this lactomalic bacteria. It's just a byproduct.
Well, the primary role in MLF is to de-acidify the wine. In certain regions, the berries on the vine are particularly high in acid, where we get cooler regions, and too many harsh acids in the wine are going to make that wine feel particularly unpleasant. By lowering the acids in the wine, we're also creating a more stable wine. And finally, it can also add some sensory elements to the wine as well. So you get things like a slightly richer mouthfeel. You may get some different aromas coming through the wine, particularly in the case of something like Chardonnay. You can start to get appley aromas, buttery aromas as well. So like I say, MLF is the process of converting a harsh malic acid to a softer lactic acid. And this is done by, of course, introducing the lactic acid bacteria to the wine during the winemaking process. So it aids the wine by making it more microbiologically stable as that lactic acid bacteria feeds on some of the elements in the wine during the conversion. And once this has been done, like I say, there are several descriptors that may indicate that a wine has undergone MLF. That wine is going to start to feel a little bit softer, a little bit rounder. And that change in the mouthfeel is due to the pH levels in the wine changing as we undergo the MLF process. And also an increase in ethyl lactate as well in the wine is going to increase that mouth.
Beautiful. And so the Chardonnay that we're going to be tasting, like Champagne, is actually going to have undergone some MLF just because it helps preserve some of the notes from the oak aging. And so you often seen hand in hand with time or exposure to oak, which our Chardonnay will have seen a little bit of, not overly much so, but a little bit. And Champagne is blended, going back to the slide at hand. They do it very formally, as French people do. They taste it every day, and they sample each barrel and they mix them in the perfect proportion, or more likely, less romantically, the proportion of the stuff that they have. But there is an art to it. So it's not just what grew well that year. It is what they want to showcase their brand to be. And Champagne can age, 15, 20 years, if it's a vintage Champagne especially. It's not going to improve with age because it's already done its improvement at the winery itself before being released, but it can last on your shelf. And it's actually one of the few wines that doesn't need to be laid horizontally while aging. Usually a wine, because the cork needs to be prevented from drying out. And so, if a wine is being aged for 10, 15 years, we store it horizontally. Whereas for Champagne, because of all the pressure, there's 5 atmospheres of pressure inside the Champagne bottle. It doesn't need that horizontal lay. So they riddle it, so they remove the dead yeast after that MLF and the secondary fermentation. Then they take out the gross stuff and they add a little sugar and call it a day. And a little quote: in victory, you deserve Champagne. In defeat, you really need it. Now to go on to the final place, the place that we are going to be drinking from, also in America. We're talking about Sonoma. And so Sonoma, we've been here before when we did a little Pinot, but it's really going to be the place where Chardonnay shines in America, especially in California. California, it can be really warm, but there are these regions, especially in Sonoma, where it is cool. So think, coastal, think, the mist coming from the sea. And especially so on this map, Fort Ross Seaview, Sonoma Coast, are really the places where a certain expression of it shines best.
Soil is a living thing. Up here on the hillsides and mountaintops, Sonoma's vines are pushed to their limits.
We are climbing up the mountain in the Alexander Valley. This is part of the Mayacamas mountain chain, which is the heart and soul of Sonoma County.
Randy Ullum is Kendall Jackson's wine master and believes that these elevated sites produce wines of exceptional depth and complexity.
The reason we like the mountaintops and the hills is because as you go up in elevation, the temperature lowers a bit. And on top of that, the soils just get pathetically poor and you get a lower yield with smaller clusters and smaller berries. And that's what makes the wine so nice.
Kendall Jackson is a leading producer based in Sonoma who built their reputation on Chardonnay. Their wines express the individual character of Sonoma's valleys.
Hate to interrupt again, but what he said, that you need to challenge the grapevines to produce the best wine. It's kind of like with humans, if you mind, suspending your disbelief. You need, in order to be your best self or in order to rise to the occasion, you need some adversity. You need to be able to rise to the occasion. So with grapes, if you make it too easy for them, like they're not going to be the best selves that they can be. They're going to be boring. They're going to be, they're not going to be good. But if you challenge them, you challenge the grapevine while it's growing, you can make some superb wine.
Each valley has its own nuances, whereas Napa is basically one valley and all very similar. In Sonoma County, you have all these different areas. Definitely every wine in Sonoma County will showcase a sense of place. And that sense of place links with terroir.
Almost every major grape varietal can be found within Sonoma's AVAs. In the cooler areas, like Sonoma Coast, Green Valley, and Russian River, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay thrive. Dry Creek, Zinfandel, Alexander Valley, and Knights Valley are known for their Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot.
Now, I know we're talking about Chardonnay today, but so Dry Creek, as he said, especially producers like Ridge make fantastic Zinfandel. We have not tasted Zinfandel, but it is kind of the only varietal. We're doing mainly global varietals that do well in America. It's really like the American varietal Zinfandel. It's not a white wine, it's a red wine. Please don't drink pink or white Zinfandel. It's just not as respected by anyone. But like if you enjoy it, like keep drinking it. But yeah, and then also Alexander and Knights Valley are right on the border with Napa, and so you have a very similar, a great similarity between their wines and Napa's wines, especially for Cabernet. But you have a little bit of a better deal just because it is not Napa Valley, so it is Sonoma. They can't classify as Napa, and so you will see a better bang for your buck, most likely.
At the southern tip of the county in Los Caneros, Sonoma has one more surprise in store. Here, they combine Chardonnay and Pinot Noir to make world-class sparkling wines. In a number of California's cooler regions, growers are producing grapes with low sugars and high acids required for great sparkling wines, and consumers are taking notice.
I was there. Yeah,
soil is a living thing.
But I was there. So this is Kistler Vineyard. Actually,
and new winery equipment has helped
really nice
winemakers produce sparkling wines in a style unique to California.
California sparkling wines tend to show a little bit more fruit character because it's a little bit cooler in Champagne than it is here. Our wines tend to be a little bit softer.
Gloria Ferrer is a Spanish company making sparkling wines in the traditional method. Their style utilizes long bottle aging and underground cellars to impart added character to the wines. Soil is a living thing.
So yes, so the sparkling wine from California is usually made in the Champagne method. So it's going to have more of that autolytic or yeasty character. So think bread, think toast, and think almost beer in the character. And because of that, it ages better than that Prosecco we had week one. So it's more of the style of Cava and Champagne. And Cremant. Just to go back, Cremant is the kind of the generic name for Champagne that's not grown in the little town of Champagne. If it's grown anywhere else in France, for instance, in Burgundy or Bourgogne, it would be labeled Cremant de Bourgogne, which is a much better bargain. You'll probably pay 20 euros as opposed to 30, and it will be as good.
Soil is a living.
So now to California overall, we see that it's not just Napa, it's not just Sonoma. There are other places growing wine. And so, the Chardonnay, though it does best in Sonoma, as we said, it's going to do really well all around the San Francisco, the Bay Area, around Sacramento. And so, all these areas are going to be growing Chardonnay. And so ours is coming from more of, not specific. I mean, some of the grapes probably are from Sonoma and Napa, especially Sonoma, but it's going to be a blend of anywhere in California. So our wine is 100% California wine, but it's not going to be more than 85% from one of those AVAs. So those specific areas like Sonoma, just because it would mean that they would label it as that, because that would fetch a higher price. And some places we haven't been, so Central Coast, some great wines, not Chardonnay, but great wines. And yeah, that's about it. Okay, and then backing up even further, we see that there is more places on the West Coast growing wine. So the top 3 wine producing states, Washington, Oregon, California, we see that Oregon, like we saw in the video last week, they grow Burgundy varietals, they grow Pinot and Chardonnay. And Washington State, in this area east of Portland called Walla Walla, which is kind of a cool name. It's called Walla Walla, Washington, which is kind of fun to say. But yeah, they grow Chardonnay there too. It's a little bit warmer there, so it's going to be more of the California style. But it is good, and you'll see good stuff there. So now we are going to have wine number 2. I just wanted to emphasize this thing on the label. It says Heritage Reserve. So in countries in Europe, there's a lot of regulation about what you can say on a label and what you can't. America's kind of the Wild West. There's no real rules. So like them saying Heritage Reserve doesn't mean anything. Like literally, it's all marketing. Just because like I don't think they make a non-heritage, non-reserve. Like this is like their entry-level wine, and they call it a Heritage Reserve just to make it seem cooler in our minds and us willing to pay more, but like it doesn't mean anything. So like in the old world, where it's something to be called reserve or something to be called reserva in Spain, remember from, I believe it was week 3, it meant something. Here it means nothing. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully it's still good though. Appearance. Now this one is a little more lemony in color, so a little bit of a darker hue as well, deeper. It's less watery, so I'm thinking a little more concentration, maybe a little warmer of a climate, but also a thicker skin grape. So they're both green grapes, but this one is going to have a thicker green skin. Riesling is known to have a very thin skin. One of the reasons why that fungus, Botrytis, does well in infecting it in the fall. So we have a nice color. We cooled it a good amount of time, so it might be a little too chilled, but this is probably the temperature that most of you guys prefer it. Just because we're so used to having white wine straight from the fridge and red wine straight from the counter, that most of us are not used to having like, the perfect formal wine temperature. And so like, this is probably going to be a more preferred way of serving Chardonnay for us. Wow. So I was a little surprised by that. It's a little awkward. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think. It smells, it smells like tree fruit. It smells like apple, like maybe a yellow apple. So golden delicious. I'm getting pear notes, some citrus too. And we said that we could get some tropical fruit notes. I would definitely say yes. Maybe not pineapple, but I feel like I'm getting maybe a melon. I don't know, maybe cantaloupe. So I like the note.
Seth,
No.
can you tell us anything about this bottle?
Yes. Yeah. So this one in particular.
Well, because we got a replacement or something.
Got it. So what do you guys get? Oh wait, I can't see.
Great question.
Chateau Saint Michel.
Ah, okay, beautiful. So it's from Washington or no?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. So yeah, going back to our map here. So Washington makes a lot of Chardonnay, and so I would say though Oregon and Washington both make Chardonnay, Washington has definitely been a larger producer, it seems. And so Chateau Ste. Michelle is the largest producer in Washington, I'm pretty sure, or second largest. They're probably the best known brand in Washington. And so your wine, it might be, I don't know the exact, I mean, it's going to be a very similar style. And honestly, I was a little disappointed in this one. So like your wine's probably better. Just because this one's a little, this one's like, it's not very integrated is what we would say. It seemed like, yeah, it's not bad. It's just, I would say it's definitely, I mean, I don't want to say anything too definite, but I was a little disappointed. It seems very generic and simple, but also like not in a good way. Like not very, yeah, I'm a little disappointed. I mean, granted, it was a good bargain. I think it was like, $8 or $9 for, in bulk when we got them all together like that. But like, I was expecting a little bit more. Your wine from Ste. Michelle, I think, is a slightly more higher price, but I think it also is going to show similar notes in that apple. You have tree fruit. You're going to have some citrus fruit as well. You might see some tropical fruits, but I'm not guaranteed. Just because it is a little colder up in Washington. And Washington is a chameleon. So the style that Ste. Michelle is choosing to show you is going to be affecting what you see. I think from what I recall that they're going to go more for a Burgundian style, so an old world style. So not see as much oak as this has. But this is also supposed to be a lighter oak style. But I think somehow during the oaking process, something went wrong. So I mean, in bulk wine like this, they use oak chips. So they don't use oak barrels just because that's a lot of wood for the surface area exposure. And so it's more economically feasible to use oak chips and then to simulate the oxidation process. So because in the barrel, it's not just seeing the wood, it's also being exposed to air because the wood is porous. So they emulate that in a big tank. But with this one, it seems that they didn't get it perfectly right, in my opinion. I don't see this. I don't think they got it perfectly right. But I'm curious what it says on the bottle. And did that answer your question a little bit? Maybe. Okay. Yes. So it is dry. It was definitely higher acid. So much so that the acid and the alcohol seemed to be a little too, so the reason I said it was unintegrated and it was a little disappointing was that the acid and the alcohol, I think, are too high for its body, for its flavor profile. It just seems out of balance to me. If we let this, sit out, it might change. If we put it back in the fridge and try it tomorrow, it might be a little more integrated, a little bit more balanced. But right now, the way I'm tasting it, it does seem a little bit too harsh. So a little bit too high alcohol, a little bit too high in acidity for what I was expecting. So it might be an expectation thing. So I'm thinking California Chardonnay, I'm thinking oak, I'm thinking vanilla, I'm thinking toast. And so I'm not really thinking this really, but it could be a me issue, not necessarily a them issue. I don't know. I mean, in terms of this, so they're going to what they're saying, what they're hoping for. They're saying that it's socially responsible. I like that. Sustainable. I like that. But then when it comes to, so like, I like the theory behind this wine, but then when it comes to the profile, so not the first paragraph, but the second and the third, aromas of chamomile, sure, I can see that. Yellow apple, citrus, honey, vanilla, yes, yes, yes. Smooth from the malolactic fermentation. I mean, so in the texture of it, it is thicker, right? So think more whole milk and not skim milk. And the honey shines, sure. But the middle one, when it's saying, food friendly, bright acidity, clean and lively. I mean, it's clean and lively, sure, but the right pear, the lemon curd, and the vanilla, to me, it just seems a little unintegrated. You know, it seems like maybe I get a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of pear, but it seems like, you know, the overlap between them are kind of, you know, I'm not getting like a lemon curd vanilla dessert. I'm getting like you took vanilla extract and put a little bit of lemon curd together, you know, put it in a blender and you take that out. It's just, it's not fully, you know, integrated to my palate. But I'm bitching, so we'll keep going. And so, you know, this, you know, there are different styles of Chardonnay, as we said. This one is an oak Chardonnay, but it's also going for that ripe, fruity Chardonnay as in the middle. And it's also going a little bit for the crisp, delicate Chardonnay, just because it is pretty high acid. I don't know if they added acid or if these grapes, just some of them were a little unripe. Because when you have a bulk producer like this, it's going to be an integration of grapes at different sites, at grapes at different levels of ripeness. And usually it's a good thing. You know, it means that not one thing is going to stand out too much. But I think here, you know, you have some of those unripe grapes making it taste harsh, but then you also have these overripe grapes maybe making it taste a little sweet. It seems like it's getting a little bit of bad from everywhere as opposed to, you know, being balanced from everything, evening out. Now I'm going to go to Lighthouse, but I'm going to leave you guys with this video. And so I'm going to know if you finish watching it because I'm going to be able to see the recording. So I ask that you stay and just humor me and watch it. You know, you're in trouble if you don't stay, though I probably can't do anything. But, you know, please watch this video. It's only 5 minutes. I'm going to turn my camera off and, you know, we're going to use the honor code. And I think it's a great video just showing you what Burgundy can offer. I'm hoping that the second wine wasn't too disappointing. Riesling was lovely, and it was a great example. This Chardonnay was a little bit less lovely an example, but it does have all the characteristics that Chardonnay should have. Just hopefully when you have Chardonnay next time, it'll be a little bit better. You know, a lot of people are very polarized about Chardonnay. I was hoping this one would help us be a little less polarized, but I can see now that, especially based on my response, that it probably was not helping the people who already dislike Chardonnay. But Chardonnay can be quite lovely in the right rendition. And so I think that we should give it a chance moving forward. And if you're directly opposed to it, I suggest that maybe you just haven't experienced the right style for you. Chardonnay is made in so many different styles. It's a chameleon. And so even if you haven't found the right Chardonnay yet, if you keep searching, I think you one day will. And now with this, I just want to leave you with a video about what I think this producer was trying to go for, in that they were going for a livelier acidity, a cooler rendition of Chardonnay. Though they missed the mark slightly, I think learning about Burgundy quickly for 5 minutes, I think would do us all maybe some good, but I'm kind of a geek, so.
Here in the Côte d'Or, the heart of Burgundy's vineyards, is a white grape that has conquered the world. It's a chameleon, one that changes its character, expressing the soil and weather from where it's grown. It's a grape that, especially here, can be overwhelmingly complex, but knowing a few simple truths can make it accessible. Chardonnay is the ultimate world traveler. It's planted in every major wine-growing region around the world, adapting to a various range of soils and climate. But the earliest written reference to Chardonnay speaks to it grown right here at Clos de Vougeot in 1330. The rolling limestone hills of Burgundy provide the ideal cool climate conditions for Chardonnay. A combination of soil, site, climate, and local traditions are called terroir. The Burgundians have their own word for this. They call it climat. I talked with wine scholar Jean-Pierre Renard.
In each place, you have different climatic conditions, different type of soil and subsoil, different wine growers, maybe with a different history behind. So all that is a link between the place and the product.
This region was blessed by Mother Nature. The growing region is focused on a limestone escarpment running for 200 kilometers from Chablis in the north down to Mâcon near Lyon in the south. At its heart is the Côte d'Or, with the largest concentration of Premier Cru and Grand Cru vineyards, revered for their quality the world over. Regardless of style, all white wines here are made from Chardonnay. Comme ça, où sommes-nous?
Alors ici, nous sommes vraiment au cœur de la Bourgogne, là où on produit les plus grands vins blancs.
The style of Chardonnay here differs significantly from those grown in warmer climates like California. First planted in the Middle Ages, there is no finer example worldwide than the white wines of Montrachet.
Vous voyez ici, sur la droite, nous avons le Montrachet Grand Cru.
Oui.
Sur la gauche, le Chevalier Montrachet. Et un peu plus loin, au bout du chemin, nous avons les Puligny Montrachet Premier Cru.
In Burgundy, I find it amazing that the soil of one vineyard will differ significantly from another, even when they're only a few meters apart. Here in Montrachet, there's a Grand Cru vineyard next to a Premier Cru vineyard. There will be a significant price difference between these two wines when they go to market. Winemaker Fabrice Laine explains the criteria used to establish these boundaries. Comme ça, c'est tout premier cru. C'est quoi qui fait la différence entre eux?
La différence se fait déjà au niveau du climat, du terroir, parce que des vignes comme celle-ci ont été plantées au Moyen-Âge et un sol qui s'est fait au fur et à mesure du temps. Et c'est ça qui donne la différence au niveau du vin.
Wherever you see a road or stone wall in Burgundy, it has deeper meaning. It's likely an ancient demarcation from centuries ago, dividing one plot of land from another. Burgundy's growing regions are a patchwork of these small plots codified by the monks of the Middle Ages. The classification system of vineyard location is key to understanding the quality in Burgundy. On the flat land and at the bottom of the hill, they grow grapes for regional and village wines. The soil here is more fertile. On the sloped lands near the bottom and at the top of the hills, they source the fruit for premier cru wines. These are more focused in character. The best locations, near the top of the hill, is where they source Grand Cru wines. This is the pinnacle, the finest expression of Chardonnay in Burgundy. While Chardonnay is made the world over, these vineyards are home to some of the greatest, most age-worthy white wines in the world. When we talk about the wines of Burgundy being all about location, this is one of the reasons why. Here we have soil samples from various vineyards, and you can see they vary dramatically. So picture planting the same grape variety in each of these vineyards. You can only expect that the end result is going to be quite different.
Là, nous arrivons dans la cave du XIe siècle.
11th century. It's a long time. On se prépare pour la vendage?
Ouais, effectivement, on se prépare pour réceptionner le jus de raisin blanc qui va fermenter dans les fûts.
The soils of Montrachet produces wines of power and longevity. This is considered by many to be the greatest white wine appellation in France, and perhaps the world. Close by, in the quiet village of Marceau, they stand ready for harvest. This is a town with wine at its heart. The weather here is unpredictable. Mother Nature can have her own ideas. The harvesters are called into action as the rain begins. For the vigneron, it's essential that the grapes are picked before water swells the fruit or rot sets in. I'm not prone to panic. Generations of experience on this land have taught them a respect for tradition, a life in harmony with the vine. Here they celebrate cool climate Chardonnay, a benchmark style worldwide. When we look at the range of wines available in Burgundy, this is a great example. We have all 4 levels of our pyramid. We have the regional wines. These are the most affordable. Half of the wines produced in Burgundy are just labeled as regional wines called Appellation Bourgogne. In this case, they even say it's Chardonnay. These wines are a great introduction to what the rest of Burgundy has to offer. As you move up the scale, we have the village wines. In this case, it's a Marceau. I love Marceau. You get a nice little hint of oak. These are soft and a real great introduction to what village wines can be all about. As we move up a little farther, we go to Premier Cru. And this is where we start to get the expression of terroir. These wines have a lot of character, a little more complexity, and there's such a wide range to discover. As we move up to the top of the level, we have Grand Cru. Now, these wines are special. There's not a lot made. They come from very, very small parcels of land. And what makes them unique is the soil composition in these properties is special. With these wines, you can expect aromas and flavors of white tree fruit. You're going to get some citrus character, but it's a backbone of minerality, and that really gives these wines ageability. Yeah, they're expensive, but they're certainly worth the experience.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you next week.
Hello?
Thanks, Sam. Thank you.
Can you guys hear us?